Let's do a quick review of how to factor. Suppose that we had 2x squared minus 7x plus 3, and we need to factor this. First, we would need to identify a, b, and c. So a is equal to 2, b is equal to negative 7, and c is equal to 3. We have our graphic organizer that we could use. If we multiply a times c, in other words 2 times 3, we get 6. Our b value was negative 7. So we need to think of two numbers that multiply together to be 6 and add together to be negative 7. And it turns out that those numbers are negative 1 and negative 6. So one way that we could represent the rest of the information is using a table. The first box, so this box right here, is going to always be our first term. So we put 2x squared. The last box is going to be our last term, which is 3. These two boxes are going to have these two values, but we're going to put an x next to it. And it doesn't matter where we put them. So let's say I put negative 1 here. Remember, I have to put an x. And negative 6 here. Don't forget to put the x. So we're going to start with either a row or a column and try and see what we can factor out. So for the first column, we have 2 and 6, which means that we can factor out a 2. They're both divisible by 2. We have x and x squared, which means that we can factor out x. And then 2x times x gives us 2x squared. So again, 2x times x gives us 2x squared. Now we need to figure out x times what gives us negative 1x. So obviously that's negative 1. We're going to fill in the last number here by thinking about what times negative 1 gives us a positive 3, and that would have to be a negative 3. So this row and this column represent our two factors. So our two factors would be 2x minus 1 and x minus 3. Now let's look at another example. Suppose that we had 3x squared plus 14x minus 15, and we had to factor it. Again, we would have to identify a, which in this case is 3, b, which is 14, and c. And I just realized this should have been 5. C is a negative 5. So we use our graphic organizer. A times c is going to be 3 times negative 5, which is negative 15. And our b value was 14. So we need two numbers that these two multiply together to be negative 15 and add together to be a positive 14. So it turns out that those numbers are negative 1 and 15. We could use our box method or table method. The top left is 3x squared. The bottom right is going to be negative 5. And these two are going to be our two values that we have here and here. But we have to put the variable behind it. So let's put 15 here and negative 1 here. We can start factoring out. In this first row, they both have x in common. So we're going to put x. X times 3x. So x times 3x gives us 3x squared. X times negative 1 gives us negative 1x. 3x times 5 gives us 15x. So our answers would be, our factors would be x plus 5 and 3x minus 1. What if we had to factor negative 4x squared plus 12x plus 7? We'd do exactly the same thing. A equals negative 4, B equals 12, and C equals 7. So we use our graphic organizer. A, which is negative 4, times C, which is 7, gives us negative 28. Our B value is 12, and we need two numbers that multiply together to be negative 28, but add together to be 12. It turns out that those numbers are negative 2 and 14. So we could use our table method. There are other methods, but this is just one of them, to sort out our information and complete the factoring. So the top left is always the first term, which in this case is negative 4x squared. The bottom right is always the last term, which in this case is 7. We're going to put our negative 2 and our 14 in the remaining two boxes. So let's say that we put negative 2x here and 14x here. So we're going to factor out of each. So in this column, we can factor out 2x. And if we do, 2x times 7 gives us 14x. So we know that's a 7. 7 times 1 gives us 7. 1 times negative 2x gives us negative 2x. And so our factors are 2x plus 1 and negative 2x plus 7.